Welcome back to the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? We are back at it again. Ladies and gentlemen, today let's talk about some Ohio politics. Now, last week, I told you that I'm officially every Saturday, 8 a.m. EST, will be dropping an episode about local politics to showcase some things to consider when you're doing your own research, or at the very least, something that inspires you to go out there and be more involved as an advocate in your local area. And I have some interesting things in mind. I plan to talk to Ohio candidates from these local offices and ask very potent questions. In today's episode, I want to go over a survey looking at Ohio residents that a lot of people are looking at to see what people are paying attention to, what people are thinking about the upcoming midterm race and just the election in general. If you're listening on the audio platform, I appreciate you. Trust me, I do. And if you want to talk about Ohio politics, or if you're a politician considering running, feel free to reach out to me. TheTrendGoldenFaith@gmail.com. We'll set something up and we'll have a conversation. We'll have a discussion about Ohio. It should be good. It should be good. And if you're listening, I'm also showcasing like this survey, a visual version, because I will now be posting all my podcast episodes on my YouTube channel. So go feel free to subscribe. Purple Political Breakdown. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into it. So let me change my screen. So this is the survey right here. And in this survey, there are some interesting things to take a look at that I want to talk about. This is me kind of looking at it the first time, so we'll be kind of rambling a little bit, but this is kind of an honest reaction and conversation and commentary about what people are thinking of. So this survey is from Bowling Green, from my knowledge. It's also associated with YouGov, which is a renowned polling source that people use consistently when talking about politics. It talks about whether people are registered in Ohio to vote. 100% said they were registered. Male, female, just everybody said they were registered. It also talks about people who voted in November's election. 5% said they did not vote. So that's interesting as well. 5% across the board in every demographic. 10% that are non-white said that they didn't vote, and 3% that are white said they didn't vote. What that means to me is very clearly that you individuals who are not voting, it's time to lock in. All right, it's time to lock in. Minorities, everybody, because Ohio is filled with more of a white population. So if there's a situation where the people that are white already get more of the votes and there's less of a percentage of them not voting, then that's a problem. So if you're a person of color, spread the word, tell your friends and family, vote, especially when we're going up against this Donald Trump regime. When I looked at Democrat and Republicans, 100% of Republicans voted. 100%. 95% of Democrats, it needs to be 100. All Democrats need to vote. And 21% independent didn't vote. So that made sense that are independent, because some of them are not political. So you could see that they become very black-pilled in terms of the political process. One of the other questions that they asked in this poll, do you regret your vote for president? 95% said no, 5% said yes. For the most part, even across all the age and gender demographics. 89% said no that are non-white. 11% said white, yes. I'm going to take a guess. I don't know this for sure, but I guarantee there's a lot of Hispanics there regretting their vote if you voted for Donald Trump. That's just my opinion anyway. And that's interesting, 5%. Not a huge number, but honestly, if you regret your vote, I do think that says a lot about how informed you are. But again, some people have misconstrued ideas of the election, so I only could be so angry. And then when it comes down to Democrats, 96% they didn't regret it, 97% Republicans, and then 22% said they regretted it that are independent. So more non-political, non-understanding, probably Trump voters if we're being honest. That's why he's a low unapproval rating right now. All right, next question. Do you think the country is headed in the right direction or is it off on the wrong track? So, right direction, 38%. Wrong track, 53%. Not sure, 9%. So, the majority of people think that we are in a terrible direction right now, the wrong direction under Donald Trump's administration. It's pretty cutthroat for a lot of different demographics. Females, 60% said it. 1844, majority of them say it. Even the majority of 45 plus. The only one that has the majority being in the right direction, funny enough, is males. It's the male demographic. And it just shows you that when it comes down to messaging from Democrats, they really have to pay attention to how they appeal to men. You can't just rely on their self understanding of the political landscape. You got to really appeal to their wants and needs. And I do think that is something that they're still constantly improving at. When it comes to race, the majority of white people said wrong direction. The majority of non-white people said, way more majority of non-white, 70% said wrong direction. And then some education levels. Democrats, 95%. Surprise, surprise. Even independents. Now, the independents is a very interesting percentage. That means 70% of independents, not political people, say we're in the wrong track. Of course, Republicans are 73%. Who's surprised there? But 69% of independents is something to pay attention to, which is why a lot of people think that the MAGA administration is going to lose the midterms. They are very unfavorable right now, but Democrats have to capitalize. All right, let's focus on a little bit more Ohio-centric questions, it seems. Do you think Ohio's headed in the right or wrong direction? Wrong direction, 46%. Right direction, 36%. Not sure, 18%. So a lot more polarity in terms of the percentages. For the most part, males think that we're in the right direction. For the most part, females said it's wrong. Very similar, but numbers are slightly different. The thing that I find the most interesting here, much lower in terms of like independent percentage is still over 50 and much lower for Democrat. The reason why I find this one interesting is because I'm unsure the direction we're about to head on. I think a lot of people's understanding is one, Ohio's a Republican state, right? That's a big understanding of the state. So of course, people see it very much in line with what MAGA is doing. Especially the leading candidate for governor right now is Vivek Ramaswamy. So if people think that Vivek is going to win, then of course they understand that this is going to be like a pseudo Donald Trump administration. That's why they would say wrong track. But we are still not sure about that. I should look up who the current governor is. I actually never have. I know the popular candidates. I did a whole podcast episode about it last week. But there's still hope for it to go in the right direction if a Democrat wins. So I'm surprised that there's more than the federal election for Democrats in versus Ohio versus the United States of America. But I still think there is some potential for Democrats and independents to make a change so it's not led by Republicans. And that's going to require a lot of people to go out there and vote, of course. From the list, which of the following is most important for you when you think about the state of politics today? This is very enlightening to me because when I officially talk to political candidates in Ohio, I get a sample size of what people are caring about right now. So if you look at the percentages here, I'm just going to look at the totals. I don't feel like really breaking down all the different demographics very specifically. I don't think it's always necessary, at the very least, for everything we're about to do in today's podcast episode. But the two main ones that people care about a lot is our threats to democracy, which is obviously the MAGA administration, fascistic authoritarian tendencies, and the economy in general is 22%. So 22% for the economy in general, 22% threats to democracy, and 10% inflation. All of this surrounds the MAGA administration because under them, they are also raising grocery prices because of their tariffs, and also because of the tax cuts and tariffs, they are affecting inflation as well. I am looking at this and I'm surprised a more specific category is not put here in terms of housing prices, but I do think that's probably in line with the economy in general. And I do think people care about the cost of prices, cost of houses, or cost of groceries, and cost of housing right now. So that is something, if you are a candidate, you probably should pay attention to. The threats to democracy, MAGA can't do anything about that because they're just going to lie their ass off that Donald Trump is doing the best job possible when he sends the National Guard in. Some of the other decently high percentages to at the very least pay attention to: immigration 9%. Immigration is an interesting one. I'd be curious to see what the specific political party affiliation is tied to that. I'm gonna look about that in a second. So immigration's at 9%, 6% crime. I mean, I guess with Columbus and Cincinnati having a decently high crime rate. Healthcare is at 7%. A lot of people are worried about that, especially with the shutdown happening because Democrats are trying to lower healthcare rises in some of the costs for the people. And 7% political polarization. Again, understand that with all the political violence that has been taking place from both sides. All right, let's look at the more specific details here. So, in terms of the percentage, inflation 7% for Democrats, 12% for Republicans is interesting considering the person who's affecting inflation the most is Donald Trump, and 14% from independents. It's interesting that they cared about that so much. Guns 3, 2, 1. It's not a high priority issue. It's conflict in the Middle East. Democrats 0, which is interesting. Conflict in Ukraine. Democrats 0. So again, they just don't care about that low bar issue. Healthcare is 10% for Democrats and 3% for Republicans. Another very interesting percentage because you would assume more people would care about healthcare, especially Republicans. A lot of them skew more poor. So the fact that they don't care about that makes it seem like they don't mind their subsidies and their premiums going up. So, okay, Republicans not caring about that is interesting. Threats to democracy, Democrats are 46%, Republicans are 3%, and 14% are independents. So independents care much more about healthcare and threats to democracy than Republicans. So there is a very apparent disconnect when it comes down to Ohio voters in these two areas. And 3% for Republicans, I mean, again, I'm not surprised. Republicans have a very simple messaging system. Whatever Donald Trump's doing, it's good. It's as simple as that. So, of course, they're not going to say threats to democracy is important. But it is important to see the issues they do care about if they don't care about what Donald Trump is doing. One of the higher issues that they care about is crime, 11%. And I do think this is going to be a tool in combination with immigration being at 18%, whereas Democrats, immigration is 1%, independents it's 1%, crime is 1% for Democrats, and crime is 1% for independents. So crime and immigration are over 10% for Republicans for both of these categories, and these two categories will be used to allow the National Guard in Ohio. And now you already get a semblance of support there, especially when they think that threats to democracy is not a high priority issue, which is why it was only 3%. Now, the fact that it's 3% at all, I do think it's still an interesting sign, but they care way more about crime and immigration in Ohio. And then the economy in general, they care about that a lot. 30% for Republicans, 23% for independents, and then 12% for Democrats. I do think Democrats probably care about that a lot, but because so much of their focus is Donald Trump's fascistic personality, that's why it's not higher. But it seems like every party affiliation cares about the economy. So if you're an Ohio candidate, I'm going to repeat this again. Really have very clear messaging on how you're going to lower grocery prices and how you're going to lower housing costs. Anything else? LGBTQ, only 3% for Democrats, not really an important issue. Political polarization, 7 at Democrats, 7 at Republicans, 11% for independents. So it seems a decent amount of care there. That was interesting. Here's the next question. Thinking about your own economic situation over the past year, do you feel your personal economic situation has gotten better, gotten worse, or stayed about the same? In total, about majority of the people who, okay, so they said 6% got much better, 90% somewhat better, 40% about the same, and 26% somewhat worse. I'm more curious about this in the political ID sense. So for the political ID sense, Democrats say 40% of them says it gotten somewhat worse, and 45% said it gotten much worse. Republicans say it got somewhat better under Trump or about the same under Trump, is at 27%. So they're a little bit more scattered. Well, for the most part, Democrats are all in on the idea that it's worse. Republicans are 10% gotten much better, 41% gotten somewhat better, 27% about the same, 18% about someone worse, and then 4% much worse. So of course they're going to have it skewed that it gotten better for Republicans, but it is interesting to see about 18% said it's gotten somewhat worse, or 27% about the same. So about the same or worse in total for them. What is that? 35, 45, almost 50% of Republicans are about the same or worse under Trump's administration. I think that says a lot. Independents, for the most part, are so much worse or much worse. So majority of people think it's gotten worse, or at the very least about average. About half of the people think it's gotten at least the same or much worse, either about half or more. Basically, that's very telling. Very telling. As you may know, over the past several decades, there have been large reduction in the percentage of workers who are represented by unions. Do you think this has been very good for working people, somewhat good for working people, somewhat bad for working people, very bad for working people? I'm just gonna move all the way to the party lines. I find that more interesting for this conversation. So sorry about the yawn, by the way. 25 strongly disapprove, 45% strongly disapprove. Oh, this is different. This is a different thing I'm looking at. Oh, here's the union ones. So 30% said somewhat bad for working people, 30% very bad for working people, 28% said somewhat good for working people. So they're about even. Large reduction in the percentage of world represented by unions. So the majority, about 60-ish% think that it's not good for unions, but the fact that there's still like around 40 that thinks it's good, I do think it's interesting. Of course, Democrats think it's bad, and Republicans think it's somewhat bad, and even independents think it's somewhat bad. But 31% of independents saying it's somewhat good, I think is an interesting data set. I do think it's a very interesting data set indeed. Let me move myself right here. So unionization, as I learned more about it, it's very clear that this is not an issue that a lot of people care about unless you're like in the grind. Unionization is very important to get the proper benefits and rights that you need as a worker from these big corporations. But when it comes down to it being a political issue that people vote on, I just don't think it's as popular, which is surprising when you think about it. Continuing on the poll, how much people are what people are thinking about Donald Trump. This one should be very clear. Most Democrats think he sucks, obviously. 50% strongly approve what Donald Trump's doing, and 30% somewhat approve. I think that's interesting. I think that is a very interesting number. 55% of independents strongly disapprove. Strongly disapprove. Again, if you are a Democratic candidate, there is a pool of independents that is there for the taking. You just got to listen to them and see what they care about. But even 30% somewhat approving, and then 11% just people who are like, but like I'm MAGA, but I know this is objectively bad, so they just don't want to. That's interesting. 2% of Democrats somewhat approving is kind of interesting to me as well. I'll be curious to talk to those people, but some Republicans are against Trump. Do you approve or disapprove the way Mike DeWine is handling his job as governor? So I'm guessing this is the current Ohio governor. I don't know much about Mike DeWine. That's why I said I'm just now getting used to Ohio politics. So let's do a little quick research about the guy. So Mike DeWine, shadow Wikipedia, is an American politician or attorney. He's a member of the Republican Party, so more than likely he's MAGA unless he has some balls, like Thomas Massey. He beat Sherrod Brown in 2006. I'm more curious to see he challenged the Affordable Care Act, in 2015, DeWine filed a lawsuit in federal court in Ohio against a part of the Affordable Care Act. In the suit, he alleged that the ACA's transitional reinsurance program, which imposed a fee paid by all employees who provide health insurance in the workplace, which in 2014 was $63 per covered person and in 2015 was $44 per covered person, was unconstitutional as applied to state and local governments. When he filed the lawsuit, DeWine claimed that the fee was an unprecedented attempt to destroy the balance of authority between the federal government and the states. During 2016, the federal court dismissed DeWine's suit, with the U.S. District Judge holding that the transitional reinsurance program did not violate the Constitution. He appealed, but the appeals court affirmed the dismissal. Okay. DeWine's stated goal has been protecting Ohio families. To that effect, he made it his priority to significantly reduce DNA testing turnaround times in connection with open criminal investigations. All right. DNA testing is important for like sexual assault and stuff. Taking office in 2011, DeWine launched a special assault kit testing initiative after learning that hundreds of police departments across Ohio had thousands of untested rape kits on their evidence room shelves. So he cared a lot about like the sexual misconduct, which is fair. Keep in mind, a lot of this stuff is before the Donald Trump era, so anything before 2016 at this point, you got to take it with like this. This is probably him as a normal Republican. And then Donald Trump came around and was like, okay, we forgot how to run a state. Interesting. 2018 election. He ran in 2018. He defeated Richard Cordray. Trump appointed DeWine to the bipartisan council of governors. So of course he has some deal or relationship with Donald Trump. Held the first meeting. I'm just skimming now. DeWine sent troops from Ohio's National Guard to Puerto Rico in January 2020. To help with earthquakes. Okay. When you hear National Guard, it's all weird. And informed of the public risk by Ohio Department of Health Director Amy Acton, on March 3rd, DeWine canceled most of the Arnold Sports Festival due to the imminent threat of the COVID-19 pandemic in Ohio before any cases or deaths were reported. So he actually took COVID relatively seriously. In February 2025, DeWine issued an executive order requiring state employees to return to the office full time. Before issuing the order, he said, "As we are seeing the private sector now move more and more people back, it made sense to me to have a general rule that people would move back with exceptions." Okay. DeWine ordered 150 Ohio National Guard members to support. Okay, so he sent Ohio National Guard members to DC. So yeah, he definitely would allow Donald Trump to have the National Guard in the United States. Some of his political positions: DeWine signed House Bill 493, known as the Ohio Heartbeat Bill, prohibiting abortion after a heartbeat is detected in a fetus, with no exceptions for cases of rape and incest. So he is a no exception type of guy when it comes to being super pro-life. And a heartbeat is like really or early on when it comes to a fetus, right? When does a fetus have a heartbeat? 5th week. Yeah, that's super early on. So he's super pro-life. He basically wants a universal ban on abortion. He believes in capital punishment. Sure. And 2021, DeWine signed a redistricting map that favored Republicans. Okay, so corrupt gerrymander based. In Congress, DeWine was known for his support for gun control measures. In 2004, he co-sponsored an amendment to renew the federal assault weapons ban. So in 2004, he was okay with it. He reportedly received an F rating from the National Rifle Association because they just want to shoot everything. DeWine was one of only 2 Republican senators to vote against the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which banned lawsuits against gun manufacturers, distributors, and dealers from criminal misuse of their products. In the 2006 election cycle, DeWine was the first senatorial candidate to be endorsed by the Brady campaign. So he's actually he also in 2009 proposed red flag laws for Ohio. Interesting. In January 2021, he signed into a law that removed the requirement to attempt to retreat before shooting in self-defense. In March 2022, he signed a bill into law removing the requirement to possess a license to carry a concealed hand. He seems so... The Republican Party forced him to move. He seems like he was pro-gun control, but the more and more he started... Oh, not more and more. In 2022, for him to sign the law of allowing concealed carry handguns in public, considering all his gun control efforts, is kind of Interesting. It definitely seems like he switched up. DeWine joined a bipartisan effort to lower the national maximum blood alcohol limit from 0.1% to 0.8%, and it require reporting. Okay, so he cares about highway safety, LGBTQ plus rights. He opposes same-sex marriage. Oh, and as a U.S. senator, voted for the Defense of Marriage Act, which bars federal recognition of same-sex marriage. Is this a recent thing? Because this is old school stuff. Does he still? No way he still thinks this, right? Like, how long did he argued in the Supreme Court in favor of bans on same-sex marriage, saying that such bans infringe on no fundamental right. Blah blah blah. DeWine was acting as Attorney General. It's probably a while ago. In 2021, I'm just giving him bail because having that thought process now would be crazy. But again, but like MAGA is becoming very, very pro a lot of normal things, or anti a lot of normal things at this point. DeWine opposed a bill that would ban transgender athletes from playing on sports teams that do not match their sex at birth, saying this issue is best addressed outside of government, though individual sports league and athletic associations, including the Ohio High School Athletic Association, who could tailor policies to meet the needs of their members. So he's changed a little bit from that when it comes down to it. Is he still against same-sex marriage though? He vetoed a bill that would ban minors from receiving gender-affirming care in Ohio. Okay, fair. Instead of the bill became law, blah blah. In January 2024, the Republican-dominated legislature overrode DeWine's veto of the love that child the most their parent. Oh, I can't read. Let me do it again. In January 2024, the Republican-dominated legislature overrode DeWine's veto of the gender-affirming care ban. So in January 2024, DeWine signed an executive order that restricted gender-affirming surgery for youth while also proposing new administrative rules focused on transgender youth and adults. In February 2024, after backlash from trans people and healthcare providers, DeWine's administration dropped all the proposed rules to restrict treatment for transgender adults. Were they considering that? So he definitely moved more on the right regarding LGBTQ stuff. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So this guy, it's weird because this guy used to have like reasonable takes other than the anti-same-sex marriage stuff. But it seems like he used to have reasonable takes and then he became more far right as time goes by, which is, I mean, that's what MAGA is today, I guess. All right. So that's a Mike DeWine. So I got a little understanding of him. I think that's necessary to really understand the poll that we're looking at. And I'm guessing more like non-whites, whites. I think generally it seems like he's just disliked. Somewhat approved, 24%. Somewhat disapproved. So he's kind of like around the middle. There's like not strong feelings about the guy. Okay. Since he's anti-abortion, I expected more females. All right, looking at the party lines. Democrats somewhat disapprove, about 28% strongly disapprove, but a lot of them, it's not as like apparent as Donald Trump, or it was like 90% all strongly disapprove. Like 28% strongly disapproving for Democrats is actually not bad for a Republican candidate. Now, if this was Vivek Ramaswamy, it would be 99% strongly disapprove for Democrats. Republicans, for the most part, because he's so moderate, that's why he has these type of. He seems like a more moderate governor than you would expect for like a Republican candidate at this point. Because he's 23% somewhat disapproved, so even Republicans don't like certain things he does. 90% neither, and 34% somewhat approve. Independents generally are like in the middle, like 20% somewhat approve, 20% I don't have an opinion, 20% I don't like you, 20% I really don't like you. The only thing that doesn't have like a high percentage is like nobody strongly approves of them. There's just more numbers of strongly disapproving. And that's gonna make sense if you don't feel like if like any good stuff is happening in Ohio. You know what I'm saying? So of course you're never gonna see that unless he's making like transformational policy decisions. Okay. How often can you trust the government in Washington to do what is right? 0%. Never. Oh, I guess you would have to take into account the current administration. Even like if I gave my general opinions, like generally, or like some of the time I would say but for the most part, people are right in the middle. Either never, some of the time. Like they're either saying never, most of them are saying never. So no, actually, independence is mostly never, but it's pretty close to some of the time. Republicans are about half the time or some of the time. They're pretty higher because Donald Trump's in office, and Democrats are about 50% because like DC is more than just Trump. Interesting. How else can you trust the state government in Columbus to do is right? I don't know much about Columbus. I don't even live in Columbus, so I can't really give my thoughts. But here's what they say: about 50% some of the time, 36. There's a lot more good thoughts about in the Columbus. It seems, you know. How effective do you believe the systems of checks and balances and maintaining accountability in the federal government? As of right now, it's terrible. It's terrible. Let's go look at party lines. Very effective, 7%. Democrats are about 3. Republicans are 10, 9. Most of them know it's not very effective. Somewhat effective. I'm surprised Republicans are at somewhat effective. I'm surprised independents are there. And not effective at all, I would agree. I'll be like probably where Democrats are. But pretty split. Not much to gain from there. Pretty normal answers. Are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the way democracy is working in the country? Very interesting question. Looking at party lines, I just look like, I mean, of course, all these other statistics are important, depending on the demographic you're trying to appeal to. I do think all people need to start trying to appeal to like white men more because obviously that all just favors Republicans right now. But in terms of democracy, Democrats are like strongly dissatisfied. Republicans are somewhat dissatisfied. That's interesting. Like majority of it somewhat. And independents are somewhat dissatisfied, but a lot of it strongly. So I think what this is showing to me is that Republicans and especially independents, all of them know that what MAGA is doing is not okay. Now, some people are willing to turn a blind eye, and then others are completely okay with it because they think it will help them in particular. That's just a very interesting thing to see. To kind of speed things up, I'm going to look at these. If anything stands out, we'll talk about this in depth. But this one asks about which branch of power has too much power. If I were to guess, Republicans would say the Supreme Court, and then the Democrats would say the executive branch, right? So for the most part, executive branch, Democrats, I mean, as of right now, the Republicans have control of all the branches, so of course that actually makes more sense. No branches, too much power. I didn't realize that was a category. The fact that 30% independents say that, but 33% executive. So for the most part, we understand the executive. Republicans here are just lying if they say 9% is executive. It's way more. Do you believe the freedom of speech is alive and well? Is it alive and well? Hard to say at this point. 61% for Democrats say it's not. 36% says there's some challenges. Majority of independents said it is under threat. Do you believe that the freedom of assembly is alive? This one, definitely, Democrats are going to say it is. Republicans, for the most part, are going to cope, and the independents are going to lean more on the side of the Democrats. I mean, these are, at this point, we kind of get the trend of where these people are at. Freedom of press, yeah, they definitely not alive and well when it comes to freedom of press. They are saying, oh, you better speak good about Trump or else. Have you seen the summons to serve on a jury in the past year? I don't care about this question. Blah, blah, favorably or unfavorable. If you're following people favorably or unfavorably. Oh, JD, okay, so this is us looking at the different people and then whether or not they like them or not. JD Vance, for the most part, Democrats hate him. Republicans like him, obviously. Independents, for the most part, do not like him. Strongly unfavorable for 44%. That's interesting. Next is Sherrod Brown. I think he's the Democratic candidate. So, of course, for the most part, Democrats are going to like them. For the most part, Republican candidates are going to like him. Independents have 40% for Sherrod Brown. For the most part, the percentages lean in independents liking Sherrod Brown. So that's interesting. Oh, JD Vance is from Ohio, so that's why they said it. Bernie Moreno, I don't really know a lot about Bernie Moreno, so I'm going to have to skip past that one. But for the most part, Democrats don't like him. Independents don't have an opinion about him, don't really like him, it seems. Republicans like him, of course. Democrats in Congress. This is interesting because the favorability of Democrats amongst Democrats is always kind of weird. Democrats in Congress, 44% say somewhat favorable. So for the most part, Democrats generally like them. 18% somewhat unfavorable, and 7% neither. Republicans, 0% obviously strongly favorable. Like obviously the Republicans don't like him. Independents are like 42%. So they're like, what are you guys are even doing? 33% is still strongly unfavorable. So independents are not really liking Democrat Congress people either. This is one of the few polls where it's definitely not favoring Democrats in Congress. And this is the Republicans in Congress. And then Democrats, for the most part, just don't like him, obviously. Republicans do like him for the most part. Independents also don't like Republicans in Congress. So it's very similar in terms of numbers. Like, I can nitpick, like, there's more strongly unfavorable for Republicans and Democrats, about like 10%. But generally, they don't like either. That's interesting. The Supreme Court, corrupt as fuck. I would 100%. Independents are like mixed all the way across the board, and Republicans love it because they've been agreeing with everything Donald Trump has done. Democrats in the Ohio legislature, for the most part, independents are not that favorable. Republicans are not that favorable, and then Democrats are decently favorable, it seems, and the Republicans in legislature. Again, independents don't like them. Republicans like them, Democrats like them. Normal stuff. Ohio Supreme Court. Democrats are pretty split. Like, they have either no opinion or somewhat disagree. The independents don't like them or kind of split, and the Republicans somewhat like them. So they have like a very neutral opinion about them. Elon Musk is a question on here. Elon Musk sucks, but this is an interesting question. So yeah, Democrats don't like him. Republicans kind of like him. He's been going against Donald Trump a little bit with like, I'm going to start the America Party, for example. And then independents don't like him at all either. So, based. Amy Acton. All right, now we're looking at the candidates that are trying to run for governor of Ohio. Amy Acton. Now I'm going to look at all the demographics for Amy Acton because this is very important. So, for Amy Acton, males skew not have an opinion. They just don't know who you are, Amy. So you have to start pushing some messaging that appeals to males more. They are either strongly unfavorable or somewhat favorable. So the numbers are actually not or pretty split between males. It just seems like most of them don't even know who you are. So Amy just needs to up that percentage. Even females, for the most part, don't know, because there's 51% don't know who Amy Acton. That's like somewhat don't have an opinion. The fact that 29% is unfavorable and 30%, or no, that's 19% unfavorable, 30% favorable. Of course, females are going to lean to her because also she's a woman, and also she advocates for more things that appeal to women. But that's interesting too. And then for people, older people don't like, oh no, even between younger people more like her, older people generally more, no, they're about 50-50 between older people. So Amy got some split things. She just needs to advocate for things that appeal to the people a little bit more clearly. I think that's what I said in the podcast episode I did last week, where I basically said I don't know exactly what she is advocating for as her platform principle, and I do think that is something she needs to make more known. As for the race of people, white people, pretty split, to be honest. Non-white people, pretty split, to be honest. And then educated people, more educated people like her. So that's probably the only distinguishable demographic difference. Non-educated people, about similar numbers again. Party lines, obviously Democrats are going to favor her. Like 43% just don't know enough, but like way more Democrats favor her. Makes sense. Republicans are not going to favor her because she's not the Republican candidate, but it's not as bad as I would have expected. Like 60% have no opinion, but like, yes, the majority of them are unfavorable because she's the Democratic nominee. So like, by blanket understanding of the candidate, you see the big D next to her name. If you're a Republican, you're not going to like her, but these is not actually that bad. And then independents generally like her more. Like, in favor of her, that's about what, 29%. Not in favor is about 19%, about a 10% difference. So that's pretty damn good in my opinion. It's interesting though how many independents strongly dislike her, and I'm guessing that's because of her COVID connection. That's my big guess regarding that. John Husted, I have no idea who John Husted is. I'm not gonna pretend I do. Tim Ryan, I think he's like the Democratic candidate who keeps on saying he doesn't know if he's gonna run or not. So I'm not gonna talk about him because I didn't talk about him in my podcast episode. He's undecided. So what's the point of talking about him? And then here's the big guy, Vivek Ramaswamy. I hate Vivek. That's my clear opinion. I've talked about Vivek quite a bit. But what do people think about him? So males strongly dislike him, like 30% strongly dislike him. But 38, 40. What actually stands out to me the most from this polling is how much less people have an opinion. And I think that is super important in this race in particular. More people actually have an opinion about Vivek than don't have an opinion. And I do think Amy Acton needs to be at that mark where a lot of people have an opinion about her. Just be known. Sometimes being known can get someone a vote. So Amy Acton needs to do a better job there. But for the most part, he's pretty split amongst males. But the majority percentage here is strongly unfavorable for males. That's interesting. Females mostly dislike him too, about 40% compared to like 28%. So that's a distinctive difference, to be honest. Like males are pretty like close, with 30% being a strong number, but females for the most part dislike him. And then age groups are about, for the most part, it's about even. I'm gonna be honest, it's about even. And then for older people, it's about even too. And the fact that so many older people know him and actually have an opinion, again, it matters. Race, I'm curious about the white people. So the white people are about even. I would say what is this? 39% compared to, what is this? 36%. Right there. White people are pretty split between Vivek. Non-white people, a lot of people don't like him. Of course, he's MAGA. MAGA don't care about people of color. 45% of people who are non-white do not like Vivek. You shouldn't. Vivek is not fighting for you. And then in terms of educated people, a lot of educated people do not like him. Uneducated people, or non-4-year degree people, I don't want to say uneducated, that's a little harsh, but pretty split. And then party lines, Democrats obviously are not going to like him. Honestly, this should be like 100% strongly unfavorable. Republicans generally like him. Makes sense. Independents generally dislike him. 32% of independents strongly dislike him. And then if we're comparing the two, it's about 22% in favor and about 42% not in favor. So that is a big difference. So independents don't like him. We just need more Democrats to vote. And I think the big difference between Amy and Vivek is just more well known compared to Amy Acton. And that difference can be the difference in him winning the election, despite him having lower approval numbers. Barack Obama. That's funny. Independents like Barack. Democrats like Barack. Republicans don't like Barack. Heather Hill. Don't know much about Heather Hill. Doge. Independents don't like Doge. Democrats don't like Doge. Republicans like Doge. Pretty simple. Gavin Newsom, future candidate to become president of the United States. Democrats love Gavin right now. Republicans obviously don't like Gavin right now. Independents, numbers are pretty close. Numbers are pretty close when it comes to Gavin. 28% in favor. What is that? Like 20, was that 33? About 33% not in favor. So 28, 33, decently close. But okay, JB Pritzker, don't have a lot of strong opinion about JB. RFK suck. Congressional Democrats, I already kind of did all this. Congressional Republicans. Congressional Democrats. Oh, this is just general Democrats numbers. Yeah, let's look at Democrat numbers in general. In total, how much do you blame for the following federal government shutdown? Oh, this is blame for the federal government shutdown. A great deal, 34% say a great deal for Democrats. Some. And then you compare the Republican, 41%. I mean, most people think it's the Republicans' fault. How much do you blame? 46% for Donald Trump, of course. Who did you vote for? Bernie Moreno or Sherrod Brown? Do you plan to vote in the Democrat-Republican primary in 2026, or do you plan not to vote? Or do you not plan to vote in either primary? Everybody should be voting at this point. We cannot let Republicans win anymore. Neither. Independents, 67% say neither. You have no choice. You have to vote for one of them. That's such a terrible. Which candidate you like to be in the Democratic nominee for Ohio's governor 2026? Most people say Amy Acton, but a good number of people say Tim Ryan. Yeah, most people say Amy Acton. Democrats are leaning Amy Acton. Republicans are split between Amy and Tim. And independents want Tim Ryan. Whoever this Tim Ryan guy, I probably should have done a little study on him. I think Heather Hill dropped out. I think I remember who she is. Would you like to be the Republican nominee? I'm surprised. Heather Hill's just not known. Of course, it's going to be Vivek. Democrats are more split because Heather's way more reasonable than Vivek. Even independents think Heather is better than Vivek, which is interesting. But would you like to know? We know it's early, but we would like to know who you would vote for in Ohio's 2026 governor's race. So this is the number, the very important number. And right now, Vivek is winning. People would vote for Vivek over Amy Acton right now. 50% to 47%. So it's not terrible numbers. You gotta remember, in the Republican primary, Vivek was doing a pretty good job in terms of percentage. He was beating what's her name, Nikki Haley, and then Nikki Haley started storming in front of him. So males would go definitely over Amy. Females would go slightly Amy, or males would go definitely Vivek. Females would go slightly Amy. Young people will go slightly Amy. Older people will go slightly Vivek. White people would go definitely Amy, or definitely Vivek. Non-white people would go definitely Amy. Uneducated 60. It's just so clear, distinctive differences in terms of where these votes are going to. Educated people said Amy. Democrats. 1% of Democrats saying Vivek is disgusting. Disgusting. It should be 0. It should be 0. 4% of Republicans said Amy. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Independents. 54% said Amy for independents. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I think the reason why he's getting it then is very clear. It is white older men. That is where he's getting all his votes. That's where Vivek is getting all his votes. White older men. Like for who knows, blah blah. Oh, they didn't one with Tim Ryan and Vivek. And this one was much closer between Vivek and Tim Ryan. It's about the same, but it's like 1% closer. I said much closer. It's about 1%. Oh, I'm curious about the male difference. 56-39 for male. For white, 56-40. Let me see, was the 57-40 for oh, it's really just a 1% difference. 1% more males would vote for Tim Ryan, basically. The Senate race, Sherrod Brown and John Husted. I have to do my due diligence. Probably next podcast episode, if I don't have a interview with an Ohio candidate, I will talk about the Senate race for Ohio. But I haven't done much of that. Do you favor the Defense Department of War? Anything else interesting? National Guard. So this question is interesting right here. So this question asks, do you favor or oppose Donald Trump sending the National Guard to American cities? I told many people of this. This is a strong possibility that the Donald Trump administration will do if Vivek is president. People who support it strongly oppose is 43%. Somewhat oppose is 9%. Somewhat favor 19%. And strongly favor 29%. So most people strongly oppose. But in terms of oppose or favor, that is the difference between 1%, right? So that's what? 48% favor, and then that's 52% oppose. That is not a big difference. Males generally don't favor it. Females generally don't. It's pretty close all across the board. Of course, Democrats definitely don't favor it. Republicans favor it for sure, and independents for the most part don't favor it either. If you care about not having the National Guard go and infringe on your rights, do not vote for Vivek Ramaswamy. Policies relating to tariffs. How do people feel about tariffs? For the most part, people don't like tariffs. It's not a big percentage difference, but for the most part, they don't like tariffs. Independents don't like tariffs. And that's what matters. Anything else worth talking about? Tariff. I don't feel like I need to go through all the tariff stuff right now. I bet they have a question about Israel-Palestine. I don't think we need to go over that. Immigration. How much have you paid attention to the increase in ICE? How likely is the Epstein files to be released? There's more stuff here. I don't feel like I need to go over. I think I went over a lot of the important stuff that I do think matters to people. The Epstein stuff probably matters to people too, but it's not a big policy platform. And like, if you're a Democrat, it's just such a layup to say that the MAGA administration should release the Epstein files. So that one's not a crazy thing to talk about at this point. I'm looking through the rest, just going through it really quickly, and I think we're pretty much done here. Yeah, I think we're pretty much done here. I do think this was a interesting poll to see, and I do think this is something important to pay attention to, especially if you plan to run for an office in Ohio. That's all I got here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Y'all have a good one. Take care and peace.